Hey guys, so Dr. Stephen Samuel here. Coming up is an interview with Mike Carr, probably most famous for Fight in the Skies, which also became Dawn Patrol, which was released by TSR. Also, he edited the first three hardbacks of AD&D First Edition, which is pretty cool. He wrote In Search of the Unknown, which is one of the earliest modules, which is also pretty cool. And he has incredibly attended every Gen Con ever. He doesn't have a camera on his laptop, so we did the recording just in audio. So I'm going to put some pictures over it. So there's something for you guys to look at while you're listening in, and I hope you enjoy. And we spoke before, um, and I think the topic we spoke most about was um, leveling up. So essentially, character level advancement.
Sure,
And
sure.
I came to the conclusion that Fight in the Skies, the game you designed, I believe in the late 60s, or was it the very early 70s, was the first instance of
Well,
that.
both. It was late 60s and into the early 70s, yes.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, which is probably not many people if they watch this particular channel, um, in the beginning of Fight in the Skies, it was not level advancement was not built into the game, but it then started to happen naturally. Can you explain what happened?
Sure. Really, right from the start, in addition to formulating the rules, which were a work in progress for a while, and getting input from the players and stuff. And by the players, I mean this group that I had in my neighborhood of gaming friends and gaming buddies in St. Paul, Minnesota. Once we started playing the games, I suggested we all create fictional pilots for each type of aircraft, and everyone did so.
Hmm.
And there were probably 6 or 8, maybe 10 players altogether in our small universe. And once we had created those pilots, we would tally missions. If they survived a dogfight, survived a game,
Hmm.
were able to fly back home, then we'd tally a mission. We started keeping track of missions for each pilot, and then um, decided to um, allow some extra benefits for that. And what we came up with, and this took quite a long time because we had a lot of different airplanes represented, a lot of different pilots, German and um, Allied, which would be British, French, American, Belgian,
Hmm.
uh, and then we had Italian battles with Austro-Hungarians and so on. Those pilots were slowly gain more missions, and I decided that we would put a benchmark in for level advancement, which would the lowest first hurdle was to survive your first mission, and on that first mission, those fictional pilots on any shots that hit an enemy plane in the center wing or the forward fuselage or cockpit area, a roll of snake eyes or double ones would strike that enemy pilot and cause a wound. And on the second mission, if that pilot already had one mission under his belt, then it would be double ones and double twos. And then third mission through 12th, it would be double ones, double twos, and double threes. And the benchmark was set at 12 missions or 5 kills or 5 aerial victories over enemy planes or balloons. That would take you to a true next level. However, the uh, double ones changing to double ones and twos, changing to double ones, twos, and threes really was, low level version of level advancement. So I think that was the very first time that that was probably done in any role playing game or quasi role playing game. In Fight in the Skies and Dawn Patrol, you create fictional pilots and you have characters and they advance in that fashion, but you don't have individual ratings for wisdom or charisma or marksmanship or anything like that. Does that answer
Understood.
your question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So as you know, I'm a psychologist. So what really
Okay.
interests me about what happened in Fight in the Skies was what advantage you felt the game developed as a result of introducing that level advancement.
Well, it added a richness to it, and it added another, I think, reason to play. You've got
Mm.
something on the line every time. You've got once you create this fictional pilot and choose a name for him,
Mm.
then you've got a guy with an identity, and in fact, you create a roster. You've got just on the British side alone, you've got SE5 pilots flying that fighter plane. You've got Sopwith camel pilots flying Sopwith camels, Sopwith dolphin pilots flying Sopwith dolphins, et cetera, over quite a few planes. And on the German side, you've got planes assigned to different pilots. There's Albatross models of different types, Fokker uh, models, the famous triplane, of course, and Falses and so on. So anyway, you've got something invested in the players, or the characters you've created,
Mm.
and so that provides an impetus to play more and build up your pilots. Also, when my pilot and yours succeed together as wingmen in a mission, then we've got a little bit of camaraderie and that sort of thing. Now, later on, we added medals and commendations, based on World War One awards and that sort of thing. But I would say the fact that all of us who were playing had a roster of pilots that we were trying to shepherd towards uh, experience and perhaps becoming an ace, etc., gave us an investment in the game and compelled us to play more and more. The other aspect is that every game of Fighting the Skies and Dawn Patrol, every game is different. You have a different mix of airplanes, how many are on each side, who's on each side, are there clouds or no clouds, is it high level or low level near the ground, is there some mission of some sort, is it on the German side of the lines or the Allied, and so on. So you've got all these variables, and that's what I think created a richness which the players enjoyed, and the game itself is kind of fun. The basic mechanics are pretty simple. For instance, you're flying at 80 miles an hour, that's 8 squares on the game board, etc. So the creation of these fictional pilots and a roster provided a reason to continue to play more and more often, and hopefully um, allow you to build those pilots up to experience level where they'll get even greater benefits in shooting and so on. Now, a couple of people know, well, this we don't see any listing of this in the early days, and the reason for that was we were playing a lot in St. Paul, and we were doing this with our own pilots there, and it was not originally published until somewhat later. The reason for that is we had so many pilots on so many different planes that it took literally years for any particular pilot to gain up to 12 missions and that sort of thing, and beyond. And the advancement levels became 12 missions and 5 kills, whichever you reached first. You would level up to that level and get some additional bonuses, extra card entailing, extra hit that your pilot would score on hits on the enemy, et cetera, and including the chances of increased probability of hitting an enemy pilot on shots into the cockpit or the center wing. So it took a long time to build these pilots up, and that's still the case to this day. But we have a lot of players who have a lot of rosters in different stages of advancement and so on. So it took a long time, and that's why this was not really codified for everybody outside of our group until we had developed pilots sufficient to those levels, and then it was published later.
Understood. So there are a couple of things that I want to run by you in terms of whether you think this rings true in your experience as to why level advancement was being introduced at all. So one is there's more jeopardy when your guy dies if he's spent a long time doing lots of missions. You spent a long time with him. So there is an increased sense of upset to an extent.
You mean being upset?
Yeah.
Okay.
If your guy dies after a long time, is that fair to say?
That is somewhat offset by the fact that you have a roster of numerous pilots. You might have, like I said, different British pilots. You've got a Camel pilot, and a Dolphin pilot, and an SE pilot, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's certainly a blow when you lose one of those. But usually if you're playing much, you've got kind of an assortment of fictional pilots in various stages of experience that you're trying to build up and so on. And that provides an impetus to play more and hopefully succeed.
Understood. And the other thing was, well, one of the other things was your inspiration to make the game came from your experience of watching a film.
Yes, the movie was The Blue Max, 1966, features George Papard, Ursula Andress, James Mason, Jeremy Kemp, and this was all in the days before computer graphics. So they used real airplanes and created full-scale reproductions and
Mm.
filmed them in dogfights and so on. And it was very stirring. The aerial scenes really inspired me. And I was, 15, 16 years old at the time. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if you had a board game that kind of could give you the feel, convey the atmosphere of an aerial dogfight and
Mm.
being a participant in that and trying to shoot down enemy planes and so on. So that movie literally inspired the game Fight in the Skies, which later was Dawn Patrol.
Is there an element, therefore, you think of the leveling up idea adds a sort of character narrative, a character arc to what is otherwise a war game?
Oh yes, definitely. Again, the characters that we create, the pilot personalities, so to speak, are not multifaceted as they are in other war games other role-playing games where you have charisma and constitution and strength
Mm.
and etc. Those sorts of things are not reflected, but nonetheless, you have a character that you've created who you're trying to uh, enjoy playing in games and also advancing in terms of experience and hopefully gaining some extra abilities over time. And like I said, with a roster of pilots of all different aircraft types and different nationalities on both the Allied and the Central Powers sides, it takes a lot of playing to get any individual pilot up to a particular level. Now, one thing that is part of the game is if you suffer a wound, you've got to survive that. And if you get shot down behind enemy lines, you may be captured for the duration. Although in the actual war, some pilots did become prisoners of war and did manage to escape and get back to their side. So
Mm.
in Fight in the Skies and Dawn Patrol, if you have a pilot that goes down and lands and survives behind enemy lines, you get to roll a d6, one try,
Mm.
and if you roll a 1, that pilot manages to escape and get back and can continue on your roster. So um, that's something we always look for. And if your plane explodes at 8,000 feet or something like that, you've got what we call the miracle roll, which is a 5% chance that
Mm.
that your pilot survives that. Which occasionally there were certainly some miracle survivals in the real war. So if you're below 2,000 feet, that doubles to 10%. So again, that's kind of a last opportunity. So there's, I think, more finality in Dawn Patrol, Fight in the Skies, than in a lot of role-playing games, especially with
Mm.
some of the D&D stuff where you can raise the dead and resurrection and that's wishes to restore your character and that sort of thing. So it's a little more final than that sort of alternate approach, which people hate to lose their characters. There's no question about that. So
Yeah.
that's a pain we all feel from time to time.
Yeah, and no one wants to see necromancy in an aeroplane dogfight game.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no undead or anything like that. Yeah.
so if we were to build a bridge from Fight in the Skies to I suppose what we would think of as modern role-playing games, that bridge would include Dave Arneson's Blackmore, which you played in.
Yes.
And so I'm not a war gamer, but I think level advancement of some description might exist in war games, but at the level of the unit. Is it fair to say that Fight in the Skies was the first to have character advancement at the level of an individual?
I believe so. Again, it was not well documented because we were mostly insulated in our group in St. Paul and Minneapolis, the Twin Cities of Minnesota.
Mm.
But absolutely, yes. And I think the players that are still around these days who participated in the Twin Cities in that and created their own pilots would certainly agree with that. So, yes, we were the pioneers in developing that. Absolutely. Did the rest of the world know about it? No, not until much later.
The rest of the world did find out eventually, though, didn't they? So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I may be the unwitting father of level advancement, and I'd be happy to carry that mantle and be known for that. Um, so, but I think it's absolutely the case. I mean, the war game world predated the role playing world, and it was a very small insular community. Even though there were pockets of game players, dotted around Great Britain and also in the United States and stuff. And this was really coming together in the middle to late 1960s and into the 1970s. It took a long time to coalesce.
Mm.
And
I'm guessing.
now it's
Sorry, go ahead.
it's a worldwide phenomenon, which is pretty amazing and also very gratifying.
Yes, and I should point out at this point that there's only one person who's been to every Gen Con ever.
That's true.
Um, yeah, which is pretty amazing. Was there, I mean, I recognize this is quite possibly unlikely to know, but was there a moment that you might remember back in the early 70s where um, you thought, ah, my idea has been used. My level advancement idea has been used, for example, by Dave Arneson. I assume it would have been by Dave Arneson, and that was a conscious moment for you.
Um, Not really. It was something we just kind of took for granted, and it turned in turned out to be in the long run, a major concept.
Mm,
Um, but we were doing a lot of different games in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We had a group probably 20 or 25 active players there, which it turns out in retrospect was one of the largest and most dynamic groups of gamers. We thought it was probably somewhere in England until one of our guys went to
mm,
England, and he said there's not as organized a scene as it appeared to be uh, from from the other side of the pond, so to speak. So I think that that era, that epic, so to speak, from the middle 60s until into 1980 and so on, that Twin Cities was really the epicenter of game development and innovation and that sort of thing. Not that it wasn't going on elsewhere, but we really had a big um, community, and Dave Arneson was pretty much at the center of that. And he ran a number of games, and he ran a gigantic Napoleonic era campaign, which
mm.
combined elements of diplomacy and tabletop battles and so on. I don't know. I can go into that if you'd like, um, but that was an area where uh, there was a lot of innovation, and he
Mm.
created this big campaign structure, basically to allow us to come up with tabletop battles, battles that could be fought out on the tabletop when different armies clashed with each other, and after moving on a map. And um, for instance, battle in Brittany, uh, British Army landed and was advancing, and the French were marshaling their forces to oppose them, and the British commander was moving his armies on the map of Brittany, and the French commander was doing the same, coming from the other direction. And wherever they happened to meet, Dave Arneson would get a map of that particular locale, and they'd sketch it out on big sheets of craft paper on a ping pong table, table
Mhm.
tennis table, and they had all sorts of 25 millimeter lead figures painted up in regiments and so on, and would play Strategos N, which was a set of rules that Dave Wesley had developed from a prior version from I think 1890s or early 1900s,
Mm.
1900s by a gentleman named Totten, Totten. So we were going through fairly elaborate machinations to come up with games to play, naval battles, which spawned the Don't Give Up the Ship rules and the tabletop battles and so on. So it was a lot of effort to keep us engaged and entertained, and it certainly worked.
So, and I love the whenever I read or hear about the Napoleonics campaign, it strikes me like a computer game with Dave Arneson as the code. Um, and it's
True.
so so one thing that really interests me as well is you were first of all you were quite young in your group. I mean, you were in your teens
Yes.
when you came up with Fight in the Skies, and Dave Arneson was also quite young in his gaming group with Dave Wesley and co. Um, and the three of you, Dave Wesley, Dave Arneson, and yourself, were game designers among a lot of people who maybe only love to play and didn't even want to turn their hands at game design. So there's something um, you're in the minority in your group in being a game designer.
Yeah,
And I wondered if you would speculate. And again, I love asking the hard questions, but it means I never expect you
sure.
to know as to what it was that differentiated you, Dave, both Daves, from other people at the time. Why did you guys design and other guys play?
That is a good question. I think that there are so many topics, certainly less so today. 50 years later, there's games on everything under the sun, and some
Mm,
that are totally abstract and so on. But in those days, there were very few games. And um, for example, the Avalon Hill Game Company out of Baltimore, Maryland, on the East Coast, which was actually a subsidiary of a printing company, they were the primary publishers of board war games going back, I think, to 1958. And uh, their business model was to release one new game every year. It was a really a small operation. Tom Shaw was the chief executive, and he was a game designer himself. And they had a couple other um, individuals that would, in the early days, propose games that they might publish and did publish. So all of us in the gaming world were awaiting every year the Avalon Hill release would be in April or May, and eagerly awaited and happily accepted, unless it was some topic that you didn't care for. You have to wait another year.
mhm,
Hopefully, something would be appeal to you the next year. So there was a natural impetus to design more games and on different topics that would fascinate us as potential game designers. And there's also, I think, a pretty natural inclination among game designers who play other games and think, "Oh, I could do something a little better. Or this is okay, but it doesn't have a high play value." Or would I want to play it again? Is another question that is pretty compelling. That's really the I think the truest test. If somebody plays your game and they'd like to play it again, then you maybe have a winner on your hands. If it's a one and done sort of thing, which a lot of games are, unfortunately, um, then that design doesn't have sufficient merit or enough um, critical mass in terms of concepts and fun. Play value is really important, I think. So I think there's a different way of looking at it. The game people who design games think, what could I come up with on such and such a topic, whatever it might be, whether it's fantasy or science fiction or history or something abstract, and other people are just content to play. So there is a dichotomy there, I think, and I would agree with you in that sense. What makes us different is maybe we're a little more um, not just innovative, but also questioning what could be done in concepts and that sort of thing. So um, I think it's today now. If I could leap forward to today, the good news is that it's easier than ever to create a game and publish it yourself and
mm,
have a Kickstarter campaign or whatever. Um, but the downside is there's such a proliferation now of titles, so many games, thousands and thousands of games, good, bad, and indifferent. It's hard if you do create a game to kind of get noticed in this vast sea of other games and other designs. So
mm.
back in the early days, you might have a chance to distinguish your design and get it played and accepted and gain some momentum with it compared to today where it's hard to get traction. I think hard to get noticed for a particular design in the grand universe of games every year. Would you say that's probably true yourself?
I've DM'd a lot, but I'm not a designer. So I think that
Okay.
there's three levels of difference, the player to the DM and then the DM to the designer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was thinking board games more, but you're right, absolutely. The role playing aspect and there's not just the game designer, but as a dungeon master or a game master of any role playing game, you've got to do some designing yourself
Mm.
from time to time, unless you want to start from scratch and create it in whole cloth. So there's certainly those elements that are part of all sorts of games, be they board games or role playing and so on.
Yeah. So um, Another thing that differentiates you, I think this is fair to say, from a lot of the other people who were working with you, including at TSR, or especially at TSR in the early days, was that with notable exceptions, you largely stayed a war gamer rather than a role-playing gamer. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for me personally, yes. My interest has always been in history. I
Mm,
don't have much interest in science fiction. I have a passing interest in fantasy, and obviously I was very much involved in fantasy games and editing them and playtesting them and so on, and creating the B1 module for Dungeons and Dragons and so on. Well, my bread and butter is history, and that's what I enjoy the most. And I think the realism of it really appeals to me. Now,
mm,
that doesn't mean that science fiction doesn't have great merit or fantasy doesn't have great merit, because that's proven by the tremendous number of people who have an interest in both of those genres and have. I mean, fantasy world goes back to publications of H.G. Wells and Tolkien and so on. I mean, that's a long and storied history in terms of the literature, and then the inspiration that comes from that literature for people to design games and play games and so on. My main interests though are history, historical games of one sort or another.
so the desire is a bit more simulative in terms of the games you like to design and play. Is that fair? Rather than speculative? Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not a active. I'm not working for a game company, and I'm not actively producing games nowadays. I'm retired and enjoying games when I have the time for it
Mm,
um, to play. But I do have a couple ideas. There's some game ideas that I played around with, no pun intended, that did not come to fruition. I had a game that I designed. It was Destruction Derby, which is simply a bunch of old automobiles crashing into each other and see which one is the last one running, which is typically American form of automotive entertainment. I had a game on that where everybody takes a car like in a real destruction derby or demolition derby, and you try to smash into the other guys who are still running until you until your car's the last one running. Now, pretty simple concept. It never came to full fruition, or never became a real game. But I thought that was a game that would be kind of fun and obviously very easy and quick to play. So,
mm.
um, not everything flies, so to speak.
So and I'm not going to keep you for long because the more we talk, the more I feel like I can talk longer. So I'm gonna try and keep myself under some control here. There's a question I haven't asked you before when we spoke the last time, and it struck me that I really should have because you've been to every Gen Con ever, which is you've got this incredible overview of the RPG scene, the industry, the scene, the social scene, the culture around it. Um, it's probably a bit too big a question. It covers 50 plus years of history, but how how do you think the RPG scene has changed and evolved over the decades?
I think in positive ways, just the sheer number of enthusiasts who are participating, playing these games, and running these games. It's also become certainly much more inclusive in terms of there are younger players, there's more female players than there ever was, there's people of all different interests and backgrounds, and they're all pretty much welcome to play. I think there's been some controversy from time to time about this inclusiveness and political correctness and that sort of thing, which I don't really want to go there. But I think
Mm,
the fact that if you go to a game convention and there's going to be a game playing or starting up, and you're standing there, often they'll invite you to play. They don't know who you are or what your interests are, your background or experience level or whatever. So I think that this whole RPG world and this universe has grown remarkably and now branches in all sorts of directions. I mean, there's obviously fantasy role-playing games. At TSR, we had the Top Secret
mm,
Secret Agent espionage role-playing game. You can be a starship captain, and you can be a railroad tycoon, and there's all sorts of different ways that the role-playing world can accommodate interests and game ideas and that sort of thing. So I think it's the fact that it's just expanded, um, you know, is limitless and is a very beneficial change. That's kind of what I would say over the decades, and more companies are producing role playing oriented sorts of games and variants and lots of different takes on different genres and different epics, whether it be of history or different kinds of science fiction, etc.
That's very nice. It's a very I'm glad that your view is. I mean, it didn't have to be a positive ending to TTRPGs, did it? It could have been. It could have all gone down in flames in the 80s. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, there was the Satanic Panic, and that's pretty well documented. The crazy and unusual backlash that fantasy games created unnecessarily. I mean, people um, who were deeply religious just felt that anything where magic spells are being cast and uh, deities are being invoked and that sort of thing are might be dangerous to young people, which I think is totally bogus. Um, but nonetheless, that whole episode again is, which has been very well documented, really gave an impetus to the, called attention to this rather niche hobby,
mm,
and I think spurred a lot of interest in it, and it's been great in the long run. And let's be honest, the whole basis of a lot of literature, probably 75% of literature is based on good versus evil, and so depicting that in a game is not only natural, but mirrors um, mirrors the literature and human nature and that sort of thing. So you've got a richness there that I think is not a bad thing at all. And for Pete's sakes, it's just a game. So you can be an evil character and do bad things, and it's just role playing. That's all it is. I don't think anybody should necessarily read anything more into it than that. It's all for entertainment. And if I've got a spell and I can strike monsters dead with it, that's not a bad thing. it's just a
exactly.
it's just a game mechanism for entertainment purposes, and maybe I helped my party of adventurers by doing that.
I think there's one interesting counter argument to your
Sure.
positive overview, which is one that I'm currently working on, which is so in recent years there's been evidence that role-playing games like D&D are sometimes useful therapeutically. So if people play certain kinds of characters or they act out certain kinds of moments, that can have a positive effect. It gives them an opportunity, a safe opportunity, for example, to go through an experience that they would not want to go through in real life and see how it feels. And I think there's a growing argument that these games can be used in a sense as a force for good, depending on how the game is
Oh,
used.
absolutely. I would completely agree with you. I heard a great story one time, and the I think the inclusiveness has many elements to it. I remember hearing a story. This guy said um, he'd been a preteen at the time that his older brother and his older brother's friends discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and he said before that my older brother and his friends would tease me and torment me, and it was really unpleasant,
Mhm.
to be under their domination. He said, but once they discovered D&D, they needed extra players, and all of a sudden it transformed the dynamic between me and my brother and his friends, who now they needed me to be a player and a participant. And he said, suddenly I was elevated from the runt of the group in terms of always being teased and tormented by these older kids, to now I was a peer with them, and I was on these adventures, and they were actually asking my advice, and I was able to fully participate, and I felt equal with them. So it was very empowering. And I thought that was a was a great anecdote, even though it was a true story, according to this man. So that is an example, and certainly also people who lack prowess or ability in real life can be empowered in the game, and suddenly they can do things that are beyond the realm of their normal life, or especially for everybody being able to use magic and that sort of thing. I mean, that's a fun extra element that empowers people and sparks their imagination and I think gives them strength. One of the other things I'd say about gaming that is really beneficial is developing a gamer's mindset,
Mm,
and I think that can be very beneficial in real life. I think a simple example is, you go downtown with your car and you got a certain amount of time before you have to decide are you going to pay for a parking ramp or are you going to try to get a free spot on the street. And as a gamer, if you got some time, well, let's see if we can find a free parking spot instead of paying to go into a parking structure and so on. So right there, that's a very simple example of the gamer mindset that can help you tackle stuff in real life. But also, if in your life challenges, you can, as a gamer, you can kind of assess your own personal real life strengths and weaknesses and the contacts of people you know, the resources you have, whether it's financial or otherwise, people who can help you, people who you should steer clear of because they may be opposed to you or unhelpful or whatever, and personality aspects, who you get along with, charisma. There you go, tying that in, sort of thing. And if you have a gamer mindset, you can assess your own personal situation in life or your challenges, in my opinion, and do better because you've got this extra dimension of way of looking at it.
yeah, I think I find there's a bit of a separation maybe in my own mind between the advantages of playing TTRPGs in terms of socializing with other people around you,
Hmm.
um, which I think is quite clear, and also uh, a sort of mathematical or logical thinking advantage as well, on the one hand.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
on the other hand, I think people can have emotional interactions with the game that can be positive, especially if the atmosphere is positive, but can also be
Yep.
negative. I read a recent research report, for example, which had one positive example, one negative. I'll just give you the negative just because the positives are relatively well known. And the negative was an ex-alcoholic who was playing a character, I don't know why, but was playing a character who liked to drink. And apparently, when they were playing the character who liked to drink, the other players found the behavior of the character very funny. So the player was acting out being drunk, and the other players found it very funny. And apparently, the the player in the center of this thought that he was getting positive reinforcement for behaving drunkenly in the game, and he was worried that it might impact his resolve in the real world not to drink. And that was the end of the report. There was no further information
Hmm.
in terms of what happened to him
Interesting.
next.
Yeah. Okay.
So I wonder if the game is actually, if it's more fair to say games like these are actually quite neutral and it really depends on what you bring to the table and what the other people around you do. Or am I being too much of a devil's advocate? No pun intended.
Um, Yeah, I would more or less agree with that. Keep in mind with role playing, with a game master, so much depends on the game master. If you've got a good game master who's
Mm,
engaging and humorous and challenging and yet respectful of the players and not dismissive of the players,
mm,
and can you know spin a tale, tell a story, pose a puzzle or whatever, those players are going to have a much better and more engaging um, and entertaining experience. If you have a poor dungeon master or game master for another kind of role playing game and so on,
mm,
who doesn't keep it moving or is argumentative or um, bosses the players around or is views himself or herself as high and mighty, that's going to have a very negative effect on the experience. So I think the role of the moderator, so to speak, um, goes a long way toward the success of a particular game or episode or adventure. And that's independent of the game and the concept and the rules as well.
yeah, thank you very much for that. So there's only really one more question I wanted to ask you, but there was also a thanks I wanted to give you. So first of all, I met you through Tim Kask because I interviewed Tim Kask,
Okay.
who sadly passed away in December. He gave me your contact details after I spoke to him, and he was very generous with his time with random people who contact you and say, "Hi, can you talk about your past experiences?" So I want to thank you for speaking to me a second time as well.
Oh, I'm happy to do it, and I hope your listeners or viewers, take something away from this that they enjoy, and perhaps some insights as well.
I'm sure they will. The last question I wanted to ask you is what Mike Carr is doing today.
Well, I'm retired and I'm enjoying some gaming. I'm because of my uh, long tenure as a gamer and part of the TSR and uh, Dungeons and Dragons story and being the first ever cleric and so on. I have I guess an eminence
Hmm.
that has survived. So I'm happy to say I'm often invited to be a guest or a VIP at numerous game conventions throughout Midwest America, and I enjoy that, and certainly enjoy talking to different people and so on. Creatively, I've got a project coming up that is a rhyming children's book for young readers and listeners ages
Mhm.
4 and up. And I think this book is going to be a hit. I'm going to precede it with a Kickstarter campaign, and the book itself is called "Girls and Boys Love Great Big Toys." So there's your first rhyme right there. There are 19 different big toys featured, each with a two-page spread, and that's sailboats, stunt planes, classic cars, dragster cars, motocross bikes, snowmobiles, ice boats, sailplanes, etc., etc. And each of those is featured on a two-page spread with a rhyme and high-impact photos and so on. So this would be a great book for entertaining youngsters and also kids who are learning to read. And even if they're pre-readers, when adults can read this to them, every kid loves rhymes,
Mm.
and this topic I think is going to be a hit, not just with boys but with girls as well. I'm trying to um, expand the horizons of children in a very entertaining way. So I'm a proponent of childhood literacy efforts, and this should really advance that. What's going to make this give us an extra aspect is Kickstarter is going to support production of a hardbound version. This is 48 pages, which is pretty meaty for a children's book. There's
Mm.
47 rhyming stanzas in there, so there's a lot of content in that sense, which is good. So that'll be the retail version, hardcover. And beyond that, with Kickstarter especially, I hope to raise a lot of pledges so I can produce what would be the follow-up softcover version. And the softcover version may nominally be for sale as well, but the key thing is that we'll produce literally thousands or hopefully tens of thousands of copies of this book that we can give away uh, through charitable organizations that are supporting children or children's literacy. Toys for Tots at Christmas time is certainly one. Dolly Parton, the country singer, has Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, where
Mm.
her organization, her charity, provides books to youngsters, toddlers up to age 5 or 6. That's another one. There's an outfit called Bernie's Book Bank that supplies books to less advantaged families that might not otherwise have the money or the inclination to buy books for their kids, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I'm going to add to that literature and hopefully bring a lot of joy to children through this book, because I think it's going to be a hit. The rhymes are solid, and the topic I think is certainly appealing to kids and adults, and I have high hopes for it. So I'm going to have a Kickstarter campaign. When that time comes, which should be in the coming months, I will let you know, and if you can spread the word through your channel or your blog or whatever, uh, the world, to bring people to the Kickstarter, I think it could be a big success.
It sounds beautiful. I love the idea. When it's ready, please do ping me a link, and I'll stick it on this as well, so anyone listening to this can click on that, including myself. That sounds like a really
Excellent,
beautiful idea.
excellent. Yeah, there's
Um,
47 rhyming stanzas. They're all in the same pattern, and I think it's going to be a hit. I'll give you a few rhymes if you like.
go for it.
It starts out, there's the first three rhymes, which I'm going to give you. That's the introduction, and then that's followed by two rhymes for each great big toy. Girls and boys love great big toys. That's just a fact. No, we love those things with great big wings and cars that don't go slow. Trucks that roar and planes that soar. We just can't get enough. We dream the day when we will play with all that kind of stuff. But little guys, despite their size, can sometimes get a ride to get a feel up close for real and know that thrill inside. So that's the three stanza introduction.
Mike,
and then you
I'm
turn the
sensing
page.
an
And
audiobook version as well, Mike.
well, yeah, yeah, that's a natural. I also think maybe a coloring book as well. Um, so there's two rhymes for each. Let me give you monster trucks. It's I love to go to any show where monster trucks will run. I don't know why they sit so high, but wow, that sure looks fun. The dirt will fly, and you'll see why as mighty tires spin. Though others choke on dirt and smoke, it always makes me grin.
It's
So,
really cool, Mike.
and on and on. So,
It's
I
really
think
cool.
it's
Don't
going to
give
be a
away
hit.
the whole book, otherwise no one will
No,
start
okay, all right, I won't.
the.
Well, the funny thing is, I wrote this in 2000 and 2001. Couldn't find a publisher for it. So the bad news is I've sat on it for 25 years. But the good news is now there's Kickstarter, which is not just a platform to raise pledges for production of a creative project, but to get the word out. So I think that platform has got a lot of followers and a lot of visitors, and I think that's going to be the, the impetus for success for this project. And obviously, it stands on its own merits, but if I can get a lot of attention for it through that platform, and people get this book in their hands, and the fact that we're going to give away literally tens of thousands of these books, that won't hurt. So I think all in all, this is going to be an exciting project. So this is kind of my main focus, within the not too distant future here. So I appreciate your support and allowing me to give a plug.
Absolutely. And I wish you the best with it. And
Thank you.
thank you very, very much for your time again, Mike, and for your perseverance at the beginning of this call. And I wish you a good rest of your day. We're coming up to dinner time here, so it's dark
Great.
outside.
Okay.
Um,
And when's your next visit to the States for
ah,
an event?
I'm very sad, Mike. I really wanted to go to GaryCon next week, but forces have conspired against me. It
It
probably
happens.
won't be now until at the late this year or maybe even the next GaryCon next year. But I am desperate to go.
Okay. Have you been to Gen Con in years past?
Never. But to be honest, I think GaryCon would be my first choice of all of them.
Yeah, and I can understand that. We also have another great convention in the fall in Madison, Wisconsin, which is only 60 miles from Lake Geneva, um, and that is the Game Hole Con, and I think this is like 16th, 17th year, something like that, and they've got the whole Madison Convention Center that's taken up in that. So I don't know if that's on your radar screen at all, but that would be one to recommend as
That's
well.
yeah.
And
Sorry.
interestingly, there's Gary Kahn in Lake Geneva in honor of Gary Gygax, and in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Dave Arneson's former stomping grounds, where I grew up. There's Dave Kahn in the spring, and
Mm,
that's coming up in the coming weeks, I think in April. And then there's Arnicon, completely different convention, also in Dave Arneson's honor, run by different people. That's in the fall. So there was there's a spring Arneson convention and a fall Arneson convention. So how cool is that?
it's very cool. I need to take a sabbatical and just do a
Yes,
tour
I
of
think
the
so. Yeah,
various
yeah.
conventions.
Absolutely. Well, let me know when you come to Wisconsin. I'd be happy to get together.
Thank you very much, Mike. All right.
All right,
Take
Stephen.
care.
Thanks.
All the best.
Okay. Same to you.